So as I promised last year, I'm back this Halloween to talk about alien and UFO sightings. Now before I begin, I just want to say that unlike cryptids, which I don't believe in at all, I do believe that there are aliens out there in the universe. Though I don't actually believe that they've ever come to Earth or anything, so everything I'm talking about here, I don't really believe at all. That being said, though, I find this stuff to be extremely fascinating and interesting, and honestly, just kind of cool. So look, if you believe in aliens and UFOs visiting Earth, and that everything I'm going to talk about in this video actually happened, then that's fine. That's completely valid, your opinion's valid, just as mine is. I had people commenting in the cryptid iceberg, like, if you don't believe in cryptids, why'd you make the video? And it's like, because I think they're interesting. It's kind of obvious. I say it in the video. Also, I'm going to say UFO a lot in this video. Now, a UFO doesn't technically mean an alien spacecraft. It just means unidentified flying object. But when I say UFO in this video, I'm referring exclusively to alien spaceships, unless I say otherwise. With that out of the way, let's talk about some spooky alien stuff. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th, 1997, the people of Arizona and Nevada spotted something pretty crazy. From roughly 7:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., a giant UFO was spotted flying in the sky from Henderson, Nevada, all the way to Tucson, Arizona. This UFO took the form of 9, although some people say 6, and some people say 5, large lights that made out the shape of a V. And as described by several people, it sounded like rushing wind as it passed, and that it was just huge overall. Although there are some conflicting statements on this, some claimed the UFO made no sound as it hovered on by, and then some people claimed that it was actually multiple UFOs in a flight pattern, and it wasn't just one V-shaped UFO, but most of them said it was just one V-shaped UFO. During the time that it was spotted, people reported it blocking out the stars as it passed by, confirming to them that it was in fact a solid object. Some even claimed that it was gray in color. Now, what makes this event so unique is that an enormous amount of people witnessed this event. Around 700, I believe. Including the, at the time, governor of Arizona. Though he would only admit this in 2007, a decade later, as right after the sightings, he stated that in a press conference that they were going to find out who was responsible for this. And then he brought his aide on stage, dressed as an alien as like a joke. Though in 2007, he also stated that he did request information from several government organizations, only for them all to be either like, I don't know what this was, or no comment. The Phoenix Lights would then reappear on February 6th, 2007, only for the military to confirm that this time it was just flares being dropped by F-16s while training. They'd reappear once again on April 21st, 2008, only for it then to be revealed by a resident of Phoenix that those were just helium balloons with flares attached to them, as apparently they were released by his neighbor for attention. But in regards to the original sighting, to this day, nobody really knows what they were. Area 51 Autopsy. In 1995, a 17-minute long video of an alien autopsy was released by Ray Santilli, who claimed that he was given the footage from a retired military cameraman, and the footage was of the US government performing an autopsy on a dead alien found in the wreckage of a crashed UFO in Roswell, New Mexico. More on that later. This footage shocked the world. I mean, it was proof that alien life had visited Earth, and that the US government was hiding it. But then, in 2006, Santilli actually went back on this claim and said that the footage released was a staged reconstruction of the footage he claimed to have been shown in 1992. He wanted to release the actual footage, but apparently between the years 1992 and 1995, the footage had deteriorated and been made unusable. Though he did say a few frames of the original were embedded in the film that was released. So, is this footage real? Well, I mean, we know it's not because of the reconstruction, but is it based on real footage? Probably not, as in 1995, a documentary about the footage aired on Fox, and various people who worked on the documentary believed it was a hoax. But they didn't say so at the time because then nobody would actually watch the documentary. It's not even just them, though. Kevin D. Randall, a famous UFOologist, stated that he believes that this whole thing was just a hoax. Whether or not you believe Santilli is telling the truth about seeing an alien autopsy, the truth is that the footage released is not real. But who knows, maybe the footage he apparently saw was. Bristol Island UFO. In March 2018, an image began to go viral online. This image was from Google Earth and showed a crashed UFO in Antarctica on Bristol Island. Several YouTube channels and articles spread this image around as legitimate proof that a crashed UFO had, crashed in Antarctica. However, this piece of evidence was very quickly debunked, as if you actually locate the image on Google Earth and then simply zoom out, you'll see that this was actually just an avalanche from Mount Paget, and that the object people saying was a UFO was actually just a block of ice. Battle of Los Angeles. Not to be confused by the mediocre film from 2011, or its video game, or its cancelled sequel, on the night of February 24th, 1942, air raids around Los Angeles, California went wild, warning the American people of a potential Imperial Japanese attack. This event went on until the early hours of February 25th, before the military went, "Sorry guys, it was a false alarm, nothing to see here." During these few hours, the US military fired numerous 50 caliber machine guns and anti-aircraft shells at a supposed enemy aircraft they claimed to see. By the time the alarms died down at 7 a.m. the next morning, over 1,400 shells were fired. Several buildings around Los Angeles were damaged by the artillery shell fragments, and 5 people lost their lives. 3 of them were killed in car accidents caused by the chaos, and the other 2 passed away due to heart attacks caused by the stress of the situation. So, what happened? Well, first, I gotta mention the UFO stuff. People claim that the US military spotted at least one large UFO, and so they attacked it and used the Japanese as a cover-up. However, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this was simply a false alarm caused by the US military mistaking a weather balloon for a potential UFO, due to the stress and paranoia of a potential attack on Los Angeles. Keep in mind, Pearl Harbor had only happened less than 3 months prior to this incident. In 1945, directly after the war, the Japanese government confirmed that they had actually never flown any airplanes over Los Angeles during the war, so we know that it wasn't an actual battle. The final thing I want to mention is that on February 26, 1946, a photo was published in the Los Angeles Times that showed a UFO being spotted by several searchlights, though it was quickly proven that that photo was heavily modified, so it was fake. The WOW signal. On August 15th, 1977, Ohio State University's Big Ear Telescope received a narrowband radio signal that came from the direction of the Sagittarius constellation. I don't know, I'm not an astronomer. This signal gets the name the WOW signal, due to the fact that when the signal was discovered by astronomer Jerry R. Eman, he was so astonished he wrote "wow" right next to the signal. Lasting around 72 seconds, the WOW signal has never been detected again since this initial discovery, despite the dozens, and I mean dozens, of attempts to receive it again. And so people began to speculate that this was the first ever contact from some kind of alien life. There has been some theories for what could have caused the WOW signal that don't include aliens, but honestly, none of them do a decent job at actually explaining its origin. For example, in 2017, it was theorized that the WOW signal actually came from a hydrogen cloud surrounding 2 different comets that were in the same region in the sky. Decent idea, if it wasn't for the fact that comets don't emit frequencies that strongly. Overall, the WOW signal continues to be the most credible evidence for alien life, at least in my opinion. Foo Fighters. Not to be confused with the band of the same name, or the JoJo character of the same name, the name Foo Fighters originates from a series of UFO sightings during World War II by Allied pilots. You see, during the war, Allied pilots would occasionally see strange glowing orbs, or balls of light, that would fly around at high speeds, but would make turns that no plane at the time could make. These sightings ranged from the Indian Ocean, to Belgium, to the Netherlands, the South Pacific, Hungary, France, etc. Some sightings claimed that the orbs just flew around doing whatever, but some claimed that the orbs had actually chased the pilots who spotted them, but would never attack them. Most of the pilots who encountered these orbs just assumed that they were some new secret weapon by the Axis powers. These orbs also just didn't appear on any radar whatsoever. After the war, quite a few German scientists, engineers, and officers were asked about these balls of light. None of them had any idea what they were talking about, and claimed that Germany, while doing its own superweapon stuff, didn't have anything like that. Since the 1940s, there's been a lot of speculation to what these orbs could have been. Some claim that they were UFOs, some say optical illusions, some say German-made UFOs, and some even claimed that they were ground-launched jet-propelled flak mines used by SS units. The death of Thomas Mantell. On January 7, 1948, Kentucky National Guard Captain Thomas Mantell Jr. crashed his F-51, which resulted in his death. It's a horrible tragedy that connects to UFOs and aliens due to the last radio transmission he ever gave mentioning a metallic object of tremendous size. At the time of his death, he was apparently chasing this UFO, so people began to speculate that he had actually been shot down by this UFO or crashed while chasing it. However, this is one of those cases where we actually do have an explanation for what happened. You see, in documents that have been since declassified, at this time the US Navy had been conducting secret balloon experiments as part of the Skyhook project. Thomas Mantell Jr. apparently had seen one of these balloons and pursued it up to 25,000 feet, which is a very dangerous altitude for an F-51, which resulted in Thomas Mantell losing consciousness due to a lack of oxygen, which caused his F-51 to crash near Cranklin, Kentucky. So, no, Thomas Mantell Jr. wasn't killed by aliens. The Baltic Sea UFO. In June 2011, an Ocean X diving team discovered a very strange 200-foot-long anomaly on their sonar while treasure hunting in the Baltic Sea. Once they released the image to the public, people went wild. People began to claim that this anomaly was a crashed UFO due to its bizarre shape and size. There were, of course, some people who were extremely skeptical of all this, with some stating that this sonar image was virtually useless due to several distortions in the image. A bunch of scientists and researchers then came out and stated that it's very likely that this anomaly was simply just a rock outcrop. Then came the accusations of this being a hoax. You see, right after the release of the image, Ocean X announced that they were planning on taking tourists and submarines to visit the site. So basically, people claimed that Ocean X found a weird rock and decided to try and make some money off of it, pretending that it was a crashed UFO. Again, though, this was just an accusation. This has never been proven. Barney and Betty Hill. Alright, so this is the first alien abduction story that I'm going to cover. On September 19th, 1961, couple Barney and Betty Hill claimed to have been abducted by aliens. They claimed to have seen a UFO around 10:30 p.m. while driving back to their home. During this drive, they were approached by a UFO around Lancaster, New Hampshire. Believing it to be a shooting star, they began to get worried as the light was getting bigger and brighter. Wanting to look at it some more, Betty got Barney to stop the car, and the two got out and spotted an odd-looking spaceship flashing multicolored lights traveling across the sky. It then began to rapidly descend towards them, causing them to, understandably, get back in the car and drive off. However, the UFO kept following them, and eventually forced them to stop driving in the middle of the highway due to its bright lights. They claimed it hovered above them for a bit before Barney got out of the car with his gun. However, he didn't fire off his gun, as he stopped in his tracks when he saw around 11 humanoid figures with glossy black uniforms. Both Barney and Betty claimed that these figures began to speak to them and told them to stay where they are and just to keep looking at them. This, again understandably, caused Barney to freak out, hop back in his car, and drive off, only for them to be abducted a short time later as they began to feel a tingling sensation in their bodies, and they lost consciousness. When they woke up, they had traveled nearly 35 miles south. In the days that followed, Betty began to have various vivid dreams for 5 nights in a row. In these dreams, she recalled seeing small men forcing them to walk through a forest at night in wore matching blue uniforms. Their skin was gray, and they had black hair, dark eyes, and prominent noses. They were then led into a disc-shaped UFO and were examined by the men. Betty then claimed they took a lock of her hair, examined her eyes, ears, mouth, and throat, and then tested her nervous system as they placed a needle in her navel. They also took some fingernail trimmings for some reason. I guess this whole situation's pretty weird. She also claimed that they knew how to speak English, although it was very broken English. The leader of the men then gave her a book and told her that she could keep it, only for him to then go back on this as they were leaving, saying that the others decided that they didn't want Barney and Betty to remember the event. After the dreams stopped, the couple began to attend hypnosis sessions so that they could get more details about their encounter. During one of these sessions, Betty was able to draw up a copy of a star map that she saw. Now, I could keep going because there is a ton more to talk about, but I feel like I should probably wrap this up. So the last thing that I'll mention is that psychiatrists have suggested some explanations for this event, as they believe that this whole situation was just a hallucination brought up by the stress of being an interracial couple in the early 1960s. Though others have suggested that some of the memories described by Barney were similar to the TV show The Outer Limits, specifically the episode The Bellerose Shield, which aired about 2 weeks before Barney's first hypnosis session. This whole case is very crazy. I recommend looking into it more if you're curious. Green fireballs. On December 5th, 1948, several pilots and U.S. military men witnessed a green fireball fly across the sky. There were even multiple civilians in the area who also reported the same green fireball flying through the sky. At the time of this event, there were definitely people who believed that this was actually a UFO. But the US military at the time was more concerned about these green fireballs than the result of radiological warfare experiments by the Soviet Union or Soviet ally. So the US military began investigating and created Project Twinkle in 1949, a network of green fireball observation and photographic units. Though this project didn't actually go anywhere, because in 1951 it was discontinued by the military, as the military just kind of went, yeah, these are probably just like meteorites or something, our bad. But in the decades since this initial sighting, not only have more green fireballs been spotted in the sky, but more and more people begin to claim that they're actually alien in origin, with some believing them to be UFOs, while others believe that these green fireballs are actually alien weapons being tested. So, are these green fireballs UFOs? Well, before you make your own opinion on the topic, let me just show you this image of a meteor, or a bolide, which is an exceptionally bright meteor. I had no idea there was even a word for that, but okay. I think it's safe to say that at least a few of these sightings were probably just these. Mars alien remnants. It seems that nearly every time NASA releases a new photograph of the surface of Mars, there seems to be at least one person out there claiming that the photos show some kind of remnant of a destroyed alien society. Some examples include an instance in 2022 where people claimed that NASA had gotten a photograph of a crashed UFO on Mars, only for it then to be revealed that that was just the wreckage from the February 2021 landing of the Perseverance rover, a backshell to be exact. In May 2022, there was also a report of a doorway on Mars being discovered by the Curiosity rover, only for it then to be revealed that this was just a cliffside that looked like this due to the angles of the sunlight and shade. In 2014, it was speculated by people online that the Curiosity rover had discovered an alien thigh bone from some deceased alien life form, or maybe even an abducted human being. Only for it then to be revealed that this was just a rock being affected by erosion caused by the wind. In December 2017, people began speculating that the Curiosity rover had discovered a cannonball from either an ancient alien war or a human-made cannonball that aliens took from Earth in the 16th century. Only for it then to be revealed that this was just a little ball made of calcium sulfites, sodium, and magnesium. In 2014, people then began speculating that NASA had captured an alien teleportation device, only for it then to be revealed that this was just a blip caused by a cosmic ray hit. And to end this section off, there's the most iconic Mars alien discovery, the alien Bigfoot, or statue. In 2008, the Spirit rover took a photo of a rock formation that looked like it was some kind of alien figure walking, even looking a little bit like Bigfoot. But this was just a combination of a rock and an optical illusion. The Travis Walton UFO incident. So you might know this case from the 1993 film Fire in the Sky, a film that I think is pretty okay, and then suddenly becomes like the scariest film ever made for like 5 minutes, before then going back to being just kind of okay. Anyways, on November 5th, 1975, a man named Travis Walton went missing for 5 days while he was working in Snowflake, Arizona. After 5 days, he was discovered on the side of a road, and Walton claimed that while traveling with 6 of his coworkers, they came into contact with a UFO hovering above the ground. Walton hopped out of the truck they were traveling in and walked up to the UFO, only for him to then be hit by a beam of light and knocked out. His coworkers then bailed on him, which you might be like, that's really mean and messed up. But like, come on, let's just be real here. Like, you'd probably do the same thing in this situation. He then claimed to wake up in a hospital-like room while being observed by 3 aliens. He then fought them for a bit, which is admittedly a very understandable thing to do, until another human showed up wearing a helmet. This human led Walton to another room, and then 2 more humans walked in, and they put a clear plastic mask over his face. And then Travis Walton claims that he just doesn't remember anything else during the abduction. Travis Walton, along with his coworkers, were all given polygraph tests, with all of them except for 2 passing. Though in the years since this case, it's been reported that these polygraph tests were apparently poorly administered, and that Walton had used polygraph countermeasures like holding his breath while doing the test. In 1978, Travis Walton then wrote a book about the incident called The Walton Experience, which was turned into the film I mentioned earlier. The Trent UFO photos. On May 11th, 1950, in McMinnville, Oregon, Paul and Evelyn Trent, and Paul's father, spotted a UFO flying in the sky. Shocked by what they saw, they took 2 pictures of the craft. Shortly after the photos were taken, the UFO flies off west, and they never see it again. After a few days, they gave the photos to Life magazine, and the rest is history. These photos, known as the Trent UFO photos, are some of the most iconic UFO images out there. However, what's interesting about these photos is that the Trents didn't actually think it was an alien spacecraft when they took the photos. Instead, in 1997, they claimed they originally thought the craft was a secret military aircraft, and they didn't originally want to even share the photos, because if they did, they thought they would get in serious trouble with the government. Thankfully for them, they didn't get into any legal issues. Although when they sent off the photos to Life magazine misplaced the photos, and so it took almost into the late 60s for them to actually get the photos back. Because of how famous these photos are, they've been the subject to a lot of debate, with some arguing that the photos are legitimate, while others claim that it's a hoax, that the UFO was a model, or a detached side view mirror used on old Ford trucks. Whatever the case may be, these photos are incredibly important to the history of alien and UFO sightings. The Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter. So this is one of my all-time favorite alien sightings. On August 21st, 1955, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, 12 people claimed to have been in a gunfight with a group of 12 to 5 short stack aliens. Short aliens. I'm sorry, that wasn't funny. Jokes aside, the group consisted of 5 adults and 7 children. So, it was mostly just like the adults fighting. I can't imagine the kids rolling up with a Glock. Well, man, I guess this is America. The adults had apparently been battling the aliens with their guns for roughly 4 hours. And while I say battle or a fight, it wasn't really either of those, as the aliens didn't really fight back at all. Instead, all they would do is just peek around doorways and windows and just like look at the people. At the most, they'd occasionally float around in the trees. After this 4-hour gunfight, the aliens ran off, and the group of 12 immediately went to the nearest police station and reported the incident. Though when the police showed up to the farm, there wasn't any signs of aliens or a UFO, but there was a ton of bullets and damage caused by said bullets. So if this was a hoax, they'd gone the extra mile and actually shut up their own property. Because there was nothing there, the police left, and all was good. Until the next night, when around 3:30 in the morning, the aliens returned, and all 12 people staying there just bailed. Just immediately, no, we're not doing this again. As for the aliens themselves, it was reported that they were around 2 to 4 feet in height, had claw-like hands, glowing yellow eyes, long legs, and were gray in color. Since the incident, it's been widely believed that this situation wasn't actually a hoax, but instead just a result of misidentification. It's believed that these aliens were actually just great horned owls. In fact, a lot of UFOologists even agree with this theory. Levelland UFO. From the evening of November 2nd, 1957, to the early hours of November 3rd, the same year, there were 15 different reports from people claiming that they had spotted a UFO in Levelland, Texas. There were so many reports that the US Air Force themselves even investigated these sightings. So what did they claim to see? One report from 2 farm workers claimed they had spotted a blue flash of light while driving. When that blue flash occurred, their engine died, and a rocket-shaped spacecraft flew by the truck. They reported that the craft sounded like thunder, and it let out a lot of heat. After the spacecraft left, the engine roared back to life like nothing ever happened. About an hour later, a man named Jim Wheeler reported that same spacecraft, only this time it was described as an egg shape and was roughly 200 feet long. It was also sitting in the middle of the road blocking him. As he approached the craft, his car engine died, and just like the other report, when the UFO left, the car stirred back to life like nothing happened. I won't go into detail about any more of the sightings, as they usually just all follow the same pattern. Somebody finds the UFO, it's sitting in the middle of the road, their car dies, and when the ship flies off, their car or truck engines start working again. So what about the Air Force's investigation? Well, after spending a few hours in the town and interviewing 3 eyewitnesses, the US Air Force came to the conclusion that what the people saw was actually just ball lightning, or St. Elmo's fire. Though many dispute these claims, as they claim that the Air Force only spent a few hours investigating, which led them to believe that the Air Force didn't actually take this case seriously at all. Crop circles. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these, since I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that these are all hoaxes, but crop circles are a supposed phenomenon that began in the 1930s, though there have been some supposed claims of them being made in the 1600s. Anyways, crop circles are basically flattened crops, usually in the shape of a circle, with people claiming that a UFO came down and created them as some sort of message, warning, or just a sign that a UFO landed there. While crop circles were first found in the 1930s, there weren't any links to them being alien-related or UFO-related. It was only when in 1978 when Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley created a crop circle using wood, rope, and a baseball bat fitted with a loop of wire that they'd then be associated with aliens. These 2 pranksters claimed to have created over 200 crop circles from 1978 to 1991. And when the media got a hold on the crop circle story, it began to spread around the world. Though some would change it up a bit, and instead of making a circle, it'd be like little shapes or characters. but for the most part, they were just circles. So yeah, there's really not much evidence that they're related to UFOs. In fact, a prank is what started the modern sensation of crop circles, so yeah, it's a good chance that crop circles are just hoaxes or a prank. Kenneth Arnold case. On June 24th, 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold claimed to have seen a string of 9 UFOs flying past Mount Rainier at about 1,200 miles per hour. He spotted these UFOs while he was flying in Washington State, looking for a crashed U.S. Marine Corps C-46 that had apparently crashed near the mountain for a $5,000 reward. Upon discovering the lights, he claimed that they were extremely shiny and had convex shapes, though he did say that one had a crescent shape. The series of UFOs flew past him, and that was that. They didn't attack him or abduct him, they just flew past him. This led Kenneth Arnold to believe that he had just seen a secret military test. Though this opinion would change shortly afterwards, as after coming out to the media with this story, several people began writing to him, stating that it was possible that these were alien UFOs. Some even wrote to Kenneth Arnold, claiming that these were religious in nature, although Arnold didn't really pay those letters too much attention. After receiving these letters, Kenneth Arnold would say that these could have possibly been alien spacecrafts. This initial incident wouldn't be the last time that Kenneth would actually see these UFOs, as in a 1950 interview, he claimed that since the initial sighting, he had spotted the same 9 spacecraft 3 more times. There's been a few possible explanations for the initial sighting, with some claiming that he had seen a mirage, pelicans, or even meteors. Now this case is most well known not for the sighting itself, but because it kickstarted the 1947 flying saucer craze, where in the following weeks after the initial sighting, several hundred sightings of very similar spacecraft came in from across the globe. One of which was the Roswell UFO incident, which I'll talk about in just a few. One of these sightings was in Oregon, and seemed to be tied to Arnold's sighting. On July 4th, 1947, it was claimed by a man named L.G. Bernier that he had seen 8 balls of light flying towards Washington State, and Mount Rainier flying extremely fast. This all happened roughly 30 minutes before Kenneth's sighting. Luckily, he took a photo of the lights, which, if these cases are somehow connected, is the only physical evidence we have of Kenneth Arnold's sightings. Wait, are photographs considered physical evidence? Oh no, that'd be like a physical evidence, not physical. Oh well. Lubbock Lights. From August 25th, 1951 to September 5th of the same year, several UFO sightings were reported out of Lubbock, Texas. The initial sightings began on August 25th and came from 3 college professors who all spotted 12 to 30 lights flying overhead around 9 p.m. And after a little while waiting, another wave of lights flew past. These UFOs will be described in more detail on September 5th, when the same 3 professors, along with 2 other professors, witnessed the lights again, this time describing the lights as being the size of dinner plates, and were greenish blue. This time, there was only about a dozen of the lights passing by though, so not the same 20 to 30 spectacle as like before. The professors also claimed that the lights were traveling at over 600 miles per hour. But these professors weren't the only ones who saw these lights. On August 30th, a college freshman named Carl Hart Jr. spotted the lights as well. He described 18 white lights flying in a V formation. Although weirdly enough, the professors who spotted the lights earlier claimed that these had to be different lights, due to their lights flying in a U formation, not a V formation. Anyways, thankfully Hart took 5 different photographs of the lights. These photos caught the interest of the US Air Force, who went on to interview both Hart and the group of professors. This investigation would ultimately lead to the discovery that shortly before these sightings, several people in the area claimed to have seen an object flying through the sky that looked very similar to the YB-49 Flying Wing Bomber, a prototype US bomber built in 1947. Though these sightings claimed that the object made no sound as it flew, something that the YB-49 just couldn't do. Area 51 call. On September 11th, 1997, a man called into the radio show Coast to Coast AM. a radio show known for its very unusual callers and bizarre stories of the supernatural. When the host of the show, Art Bell, answered the call, this man went on to describe a horrific plan for the human race. He claimed that he was a former employee of Area 51 and was currently on the run after being medically discharged from Area 51. He claimed that NASA had directly made contact with extra-dimensional beings who had infiltrated the United States military and government and were planning on demolishing major population centers to more easily control the rest of the world. During the call, the satellite feed then malfunctioned, which resulted in the show having a few seconds of dead airtime. And in that few seconds, the caller was lost, and was never identified. Though, since this call, many people have come forth as being the Area 51 caller. Each of them stating that it was a hoax for attention. Supposedly, the same caller called back into the show on April 28, 1998, and apologized for the joke. But people are very skeptical on this being the original caller. As for the original caller's claims being true or not, I mean, probably not. Roswell UFO crash. And to end the first tier, I chose probably the most famous UFO sighting of all time. The 1947 Roswell, New Mexico crash. In July of 1947, the United States military recovered debris from a mysterious crash. Initially, the US military believed that this crash was a crashed UFO, and it even issued a press release stating that they had recovered a flying saucer. But almost instantly afterwards, they were like, oh wait, hang on guys, that was just a weather balloon, and retracted the statement. Case closed, right? Well, in the late 1970s, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel stated in an interview that the US military had actually recovered alien technology from the crash site and that the weather balloon story was just a cover-up. This interview gave rise to countless theories and claims about how the US military had actually captured not just alien technology, but also dead aliens as well, and they were being stored at Area 51. The 1980 book, The Roswell Incident, written by Charles Berlitz and William Moore, claimed that the aliens were watching the US military test nuclear weapons, only for their craft to be then struck by lightning, causing the ship to crash and the aliens inside to be killed. They also claimed in the book that the press wasn't allowed to inspect the wreckage, which only added suspicion from the public. But what got more people convinced of this theory is that the book, and future books, used eyewitness testimony. Most of these people were either former military or were just in the area of Roswell at the time. So why were so many military men coming out saying that they had captured dead aliens? Well, in 1997, the US Air Force released a report where they came to the conclusion that the reports of dead alien bodies was most likely a combination of people misremembering, confusing the Roswell crash with other crashes, and just people lying. There's so much more that can be said about Roswell that I can't possibly talk about it all in this video, so I encourage you to do your own research if you're interested. I'll leave a few videos in the description to kickstart your journey. The Robert Taylor Incident. On November 9th, 1979, a man named Robert Taylor claimed that he was walking his dog in the forest near the M8 motorway in Livingston, Scotland. While on this walk, he spotted a flying dome around 21 feet in length hovering above the forest. He claimed that this UFO was dark in color and had a rough sandpaper-like texture and had an outer rim with small propellers. He also claimed that it let out a nasty smell that smelled like burning brakes. Suddenly, as he was watching the UFO, small spears appeared out of the UFO that grabbed him and began dragging him towards the UFO. And while being dragged, he lost consciousness. And when he woke up, his truck was dead and the UFO was nowhere to be seen. When he eventually arrived home, his wife claimed that he was all muddy and had all of his clothes torn up. And so a criminal investigation was launched, as Taylor brought the police to the forest where he had seen the UFO. There, they found ladder-shaped marks in the ground, and that's pretty much it. And so, the police reported this as a criminal assault. Several people have come forward with theories that Taylor had suffered an attack from temporal lobe epilepsy, or had a mini stroke. But to this day, nobody really knows what happened to Robert Taylor on that day. Museum. On the evening of September 2nd, 2017, a thread was created on the 4chan X board from an individual named Miziam, or I don't know, it's apparently some alien word. This person claimed to be an alien from the planet Varn, hovering in Earth's orbit as their ship ran out of fuel. So while they waited for their comrades to find them, they decided to just chill out on 4chan for a bit. Now this is all very sketchy, and pretty much everyone in the thread was very quick to point out the absurdness of the situation. So people began asking Museum to take pictures of Earth and the Moon, which they did. But what was weird about these photos is that nobody could reverse image search them. One anon in the thread even asked Museum to visit them, and gave them the coordinates to his home, which the same anon would then post an image of what looked to be a UFO in the sky. Shortly after this, apparently Museum's friends or whatever showed up and escorted them back to Varn, wherever that is. There was a second thread on October 1st the same year where somebody else claimed to be Museum, but there's no way of telling if this is, or isn't, some anon trying to hijack the story. Overall, the Museum case is neat, but it's probably just a 4chan RP. It's a fun one, though. The Ghost Rockets. On February 26, 1946, a strange object was seen flying through the skies above Sweden and Finland. This object would then be soon followed by over 2,000 more over the next year. These objects appeared to behave like rockets or missiles, and unlike many UFO sightings, they were actually spotted on radar. They were usually silent, though there was the occasional sighting of them making a hissing sound as they passed by. They were eventually dubbed ghost rockets, and like I said, over the next year, they continued to appear over the skies of Sweden and Finland, along with Greece, Italy, Belgium, and Portugal. Initially, it was thought that these were some kind of like test rockets or missiles from the Soviet Union, possibly even the Soviet Union experimenting with captured V-1 and V-2 rockets from the Second World War. However, this was very quickly debunked, as US, Swedish, and British investigators found no recognizable rocket fragments. Which, yes, these ghost rockets would occasionally crash into the ground, usually in lakes for whatever reason. Officially, both the US military and Swedish military have no answer as to what the ghost rockets were. Though there were some investigators in the US Air Force that believed that these rockets were alien in origin, as revealed in a declassified document from 1948. So what were these ghost rockets? Were they UFOs? Soviet missiles? V-2 rockets? Chances are, we'll never know. Skinny Bob. In 2011, a video was uploaded online by Reddit user Ivan0135. This clip showed off a small gray alien with a massive head and extremely long arms, in the custody of the Soviet Union. The alien, dubbed Skinny Bob, was apparently sent to Earth on a diplomatic mission from some unknown planet 40 light years away. It's a very eerie and weird video, made all the more mysterious as nobody has ever come forward taking credit for the video. So if this was a hoax, then I guess the creator just wants to stay anonymous? Though I guess that Ivan0135 guy on Reddit is, probably the creator, if this is a hoax. There's not much else for me to say here, it's just a really weird video. The Black Knight Satellite. In 1998, NASA released an image of a mysterious object in Earth's orbit. NASA claimed that this was just some space debris, but people online weren't having any of that. Many claimed that it was actually a UFO spying on Earth, and dubbed it the Black Knight Satellite. People then began claiming that this satellite had been orbiting the Earth for around 13,000 years, and began tying the Black Knight Satellite to prior space oddities. Like in 1963, where an astronaut named Gordon Cooper claimed that he had seen a UFO during his 15th orbit in the Mercury 9 that was confirmed by NASA's tracking stations. Although NASA just flat out denied that this ever happened, so I don't know who to believe here. So could the Black Knight Satellite be a UFO he saw? Well, it's kind of since been confirmed that the Black Knight Satellite is actually just a thermal blanket that was lost during the STS-88 mission, so, probably not. Madonna and Child with the Infant St. John. So this isn't really a sighting per se, but it's still pretty interesting. There's a painting known as Madonna and Child with the Infant St. John. It's debated on who actually painted it, but we do know that the painting dates back to sometime in the 16th century. Anyways, the painting shows, the Infant St. John, Jesus and Madonna. But if you look at the corner of the painting, you'll see a really strange object floating in the sky that's being watched by somebody in the background. Many people believe that this is actually a UFO, and that whoever painted this decided to add a UFO because they had seen one and believed that it was religious in nature. However, art historians have a very different opinion on this. They believe that this is actually just an angel floating in the sky, taking the appearance of a cloud. This is backed up with other paintings of the same scene, also featuring floating angels in the background. The 2009 Morristown UFO event. On January 6th, January 26th, February 7th, and February 17th, 2009, bizarre lights were seen in the skies of Morristown, New Jersey. These strange red lights were reported by many different people, and it was a hoax. Yeah, this was actually a hoax created by Joe Rudy and Chris Russo, who attached flares to balloons and launched them above Morristown. They did this to try and expose UFOlogy as a pseudoscience, and basically were just saying, hey, aliens and UFOs aren't real, eyewitness accounts don't really mean anything. This didn't really go over well. While there were some skeptics who praised the two, they caused a bit of trouble for law enforcement and the Morristown airport, as airport control workers reported seeing the lights, but since they couldn't actually determine what they were very worried about the lights being potential hazards to planes. And as for law enforcement, because of the hoax, they got dozens and dozens of phone calls reporting the lights. Also, because they had used flares, they could have accidentally started a fire. Because of all this, the two were charged with disorderly conduct and sentenced to a fine of $250, and they were required to do 50 hours of community service. Pascagoula abduction. On the evening of October 11th, 1973, two friends, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, set off to fish on the banks of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. While doing so, the pair claimed to hear a weird sound before being confronted by a UFO flashing blue lights. The UFO itself was oval-shaped and roughly 30 to 40 feet long. The pair then claimed 3 beings exited the craft and brought them aboard their ship. These 3 beings were described as having robotic slit-like mouths and crab-like pincers. So crab people. These 3 aliens would then place the two on glass tables and perform examinations on the pair. For example, Calvin Parker claimed a weird square-like object floated around him making clicking sounds, almost like an MRI. The 3 crab people weren't the only aliens on board the ship, as Calvin claimed that there was a female alien that apparently looked, quote, normal, and even stated that he'd probably ask her out on a date if the circumstances were different. Though she apparently did have really long middle fingers, but that was the only oddity. She went over to him and then, scratched up his throat for some reason, made a weird noise, and then that's where the story ends. The three crab people from before returned, picked the pair up, and returned them to the river. After this encounter, Hickson went on to appear in interviews and even TV shows talking about the incident. He'd even write a book in 1983 called UFO Contact at Pascagoula. So were these two abducted by aliens? Well, there's no way to tell for sure, but skeptics have speculated that perhaps one of them had dreamt up the situation and convinced the other one that the dream really happened. So basically, he gaslit him. Ellsworth UFO sighting. On August 5th, 1953, strange lights were spotted in the sky over Ellsworth Air Base in South Dakota. It was spotted on radar, flying at around 16,000 feet. This UFO was then confronted by an F-84 jet, after a warrant officer at the Ellsworth Air Force Base had ordered a pilot who was doing a combat air patrol at the time to intercept the UFO. When this pilot was around 3 miles from the UFO, the craft then began to move and quickly sped up, climbing into the sky, though the F-84 continued its chase. This chase continued for quite some time, until eventually the pilots had to return to base due to low fuel. But what's crazy is that the UFO then turned around and followed the pilot back to the base. But it kept its distance from the jet, around 10 miles. Luckily, there was another F-48 ready to launch, and so the chase continued with a new pilot. However, this chase wouldn't last as long, as eventually the UFO flew off. But not before appearing on the F-48's radar. To this day, nobody really knows what those men and women at Ellsworth Air Force Base saw that day. Apollo 11 UFOs. Apollo 11 is one of the most important events in human history, as it was the first time humanity has ever been to the moon and back. And so because of this, people have speculated that perhaps the Apollo 11 crew saw UFOs during their mission. For example, many people believe that Neil Armstrong saw a UFO and mentioned it to the public. However, it's since been confirmed by Buzz Aldrin that Armstrong was severely misquoted, and his meaning was reversed. And if he actually did see something, it was just jettisoned rocket components. Neil Armstrong was even interviewed on a later date and was asked if he had seen any UFOs, to which he directly said, "We didn't see them." But that still hasn't stopped people from speculating about Apollo 11. For example, in late 2020, an image went viral. This image was from the Apollo 16 mission in 1972 and showed astronaut Charles Duke Jr. collecting samples near the rim of Plum Crater, with a lens flare from the sun in the background. This photo went viral because people just lied about it. There's nothing else about it, they just lied about it. People claimed that this photo was from the Apollo 11 mission and showed Buzz Aldrin with a UFO. And finally, people took Buzz Aldrin saying that they saw a light outside of Apollo 11's window that was moving alongside them as evidence as them seeing UFOs. Although Buzz Aldrin said in a Reddit AMA in 2014 that he clarified that the light could have been a ton of things, and stated how it could have been the rocket they had just separated from, or the 4 panels that moved away when they extracted the lander from the rocket. So no, the Apollo 11 crew didn't see any aliens or UFOs. Buzz Aldrin did meet Optimus Prime though. Rendlesham Forest. On December 26, 1980, in Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England, a security patrol witnessed lights descending into the Rendlesham Forest. Believing it to be a crashed plane or helicopter, several soldiers went out to investigate the lights. Instead of finding a downed plane or helicopter, the team discovered a UFO that had landed in the forest. They described the UFO as being tripod mounted. It was also very metallic, and it was glowing. It also had red and blue lights flickering on and off all around it. In order to investigate it further, the team attempted to get closer to the craft, but in response, the UFO flew off through the forest. While this UFO flew off, it left 3 triangular impressions on the ground. Several trees in the area also had burn marks. 2 days later, on the 28th, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt and several troops under his command were taking radiation readings where the UFO was reported. While doing this, they detected a small burst of radiation from over a half-mile away, and shortly afterwards, the UFO was spotted again. This time, it was seen flying across a field before flying back into the sky. Afterwards, the UFO wouldn't be seen again. This incident has been labeled Britain's Roswell due to how famous the case is. However, because of how famous it is, there has been a lot of skeptics who have theorized that these two incidents were either just flat-out hoaxes, or the team misidentified bright stars, a lighthouse, and/or a meteorite. Melbourne School UFO. On April 6, 1966, around 300 students and teachers from Westall High School in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, spotted a silver-green UFO that was shaped like a saucer. It had a purple hue to it and was rather large. The craft didn't really do too much outside of flying over the school, and then returning 20 minutes later, only to then fly off into space. Though, on its second run of the school, some claimed that they saw it being pursued by 5 unidentified aircraft. After this sighting, men in suits would approach the school and told witnesses to never discuss the details of what they just saw, as it was apparently part of a secret government exercise. So what happened here? Well, skeptics believe that this was actually just a weather balloon used to monitor radiation levels after the British nuclear tests in Australia. It's said that the balloon must have been blown off course. Regardless of what it was, this is one of Australia's most well-known UFO sightings. Side note, there's a UFO-themed playground near where the UFO was reported, and I would have loved this as a kid. The Tehran UFO incident. In 1976, Iran went to war with aliens. Okay, no, they didn't, but that'd be pretty cool. Oh, no, it wouldn't, because that means that Earth's being invaded. Never mind. On September 19th, 1976, 2 Iranian Air Force jets, Phantom IIs to be exact, intercepted a UFO that was flying on radar right over Tehran, the capital of Iran. As the 2 jets approached the UFO, their communication systems failed, along with one of the jets having their weapon systems fail as well. This UFO was described as being quite round, and flashed red, orange, blue, and green lights so brightly that the pilots were barely able to make out the shape of the craft. The UFO also had some kind of secondary vessel, as a bright object exited the craft and headed towards the ground. Though it's possible that this wasn't actually another craft, but instead a weapon of sorts, as people around where the object landed heard a loud noise and a very bright flash of light. But that's it. No remains of bomb fragments or anything. But that wasn't the only bright light that came out of the UFO. A torpedo of light, as described by a pilot, was fired at one of the pilots. Luckily, he was able to evade the torpedo, but as soon as he did, the torpedo then flew back to the UFO and re-entered it. And then shortly after this, the UFO flew off into the atmosphere, never to be seen again. As of today, nobody really has an explanation for this, outside of maybe the pilots were confused by a meteor shower, but that doesn't really make much sense. Frederick Villenish. On August 21st, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Villenish disappeared over the Bass Strait while on a trading flight. Normally, this would just be known in history as a tragic death, which, it is. But it's also been linked to a potential UFO sighting, or even abduction. Frederick had claimed that there was another aircraft in the sky with him, around 1,000 feet above him, and that his engine was starting to act up. He then said that the UFO was quite large, and had 4 bright landing lights, and was extremely shiny, with a single green light on it. It was also traveling extremely fast, and began orbiting around him. One of his final radio messages was him stating that the craft above him was not an aircraft. And shortly after that, his radio transmissions were cut off by a metallic scraping sound, and contact was lost. So what exactly happened to him? Well, one of the most common theories, outside of all the UFO stuff, is that Frederick was flying upside down, and what he had seen was his own reflection. The main problem with this theory, though, is that the airplane he was flying couldn't have flown upside down for a long period of time. And so there's the other big theory. Frederick was tricked by the illusion of a tilted horizon. This caused him to go into a graveyard spiral, which is why he thought the craft was orbiting him. At the end of the day, though, regardless of the UFO stuff, this was a very tragic death. The Maury Island Incident. So this is like a sequel entry to the Kenneth Arnold sighting from Tier 1. Shortly after his initial sighting, Kenneth Arnold was asked by Raymond Palmer, editor of the sci-fi magazine Amazing Stories, to investigate a story for him. Taking the job, Kenneth Arnold headed out to Maury Island in Washington State, where he investigated the claims of two harbormen who claimed that they had remains or fragments of a UFO. When he interviewed the harbormen, the two of them claimed that they, along with one of the harbormen's sons, spotted several UFOs on June 21st, 1947, at around 2 o'clock p.m. They spotted the UFOs while on their boat and claimed that the UFOs were incredibly large and donut-shaped. They also claimed that there were 6 of them, and that the UFOs began spewing out lava-like metal fragments. Some of these fragments landed onto their boat, which killed the pet dog they had on board, along with breaking one of the arms of the harborman's son. Shortly afterwards, the UFOs left, and later that day, they were approached by a strange man in a suit who told them to never talk about what they had just seen. Now here's where it gets weirder. Kenneth Arnold then contacted Lieutenant Frank Brown of Military Intelligence in California and Captain William L. Davidson in order for them to conduct interviews and to collect the fragments claimed to be from the UFO. So the pair did just that. However, on their way back to California, the B-25 bomber they were flying crashed, resulting in both of them dying. The FBI took over the case almost immediately and almost instantly labeled the sighting as a hoax. The FBI stated that the two men who reported the sighting were doing it as a prank. The FBI then decided that the pair weren't to blame directly on the deaths of Frank Brown and William Davidson, and so let them off with a warning. It's a very strange case that put the idea of the Men in Black into the public mind. Korean War UFO. In May 1951, several American soldiers, while in Chorwon, North Korea, reported strange lights coming down a mountain in front of them. The troops eventually realized that it was actually some kind of aircraft, and so they took defensive positions. But instead of attacking them, this UFO flew past them and made its way into the town near them. It had then just stopped moving and began glowing blue and green. That was enough for the troops, and so the squad of soldiers opened fire on the UFO with armor-piercing bullets from M1 Garands. This did absolutely nothing to the UFO, though the soldiers did hear a metallic banging sound as the bullets hit the UFO, confirming that it was a physical object. This went on for about an hour, and that really pissed the UFO off. And so finally the UFO decided to attack. It began flying around at random and then played an ear-piercing sound described by the troops as sounding like several diesel trains starting up at once. And then a blue light appeared from the UFO and swept across the American soldiers' positions. As this blue light hit them, the soldiers reported a burning sensation across their bodies. And just as quickly as it appeared, the UFO disappeared. Afterwards, every single soldier there was sworn to secrecy, as they were worried if they brought this story up to the media or their higher-ups, they would all think they're crazy. And so because of this case never being reported at the time, no investigation was ever done. So there's really no explanation as to what they saw, outside of the theories that they had just lied about the situation, or that it was a secret Soviet, Chinese, or North Korean weapon. Or it was aliens. The Atacama Skeleton. So this one's just sad. In 2003, the mummified remains of, something were discovered in La Noria, an abandoned mining town in the Atacama Desert in Chile. This mummy is extremely weird because it was only 6 inches tall, it only had 10 pairs of ribs instead of the normal 12 pair, and its head was cone-shaped. This little guy confused the scientific world for nearly 15 years. And in that time, UFOologists began speculating that this was actually the mummified remains of an actual alien. And so this launched a ton of theories about how the alien died, where it came from, etc. However, in 2018, it was discovered by scientists in California that this mummy, now named Atta, wasn't actually an alien, but instead a stillborn baby who died immediately after birth and had mutations that messed up her body. They were able to discover this through DNA extracted from her body. Like I said, this entry is just sad. Lake Baikal. In 1982, 7 Soviet Union Navy divers performed a research mission in Lake Baikal. During this dive, 3 of the divers perished as they pursued a group of aliens dressed in silver suits swimming in the lake. Yeah, apparently these aliens were just taking a dip in the lake and were reportedly bigger than any of the divers, at around 3 meters tall. There wasn't even like a UFO or anything reported, as the Soviet Union divers directly said that they were just alone. The aliens didn't have anything with them. These creatures were seen 50 meters below the surface. And being the geniuses that they were, these Soviet divers were then just like, let's capture them. Let's see what happens. This didn't go too well, as you would probably imagine, as when they tried to capture one of them, a powerful force pushed all 7 divers all the way up to the surface of the lake. This is where 3 of the 7 divers sadly died, as the Soviet group had only 2 decompression devices on them, and one of them was broken, so only 4 of the 7 were able to be saved. Elizabeth Clara. Elizabeth Clara was a rather interesting person. Born on July 1st, 1910, Elizabeth claimed to have been contacted by aliens several times throughout her life, from 1954 to 1963. Her first encounter with aliens was on December 27th, 1954, where she witnessed a UFO land near Flying Saucer Hill in South Africa. The UFO didn't really do too much, though Elizabeth was able to see a Khan, an alien being looking through one of the UFO's portholes. Elizabeth wanted to get closer to the ship, but due to the insane amount of heat that was coming off the craft, it was impossible for her to do that. The UFO then flew off, and that was that. A Khan would return on April 7th, 1956, where he allowed Elizabeth to enter the UFO. There, she'd meet many more aliens inside the ship, and the alien's mothership. This began a connection between Akan and Elizabeth, with Akan claiming that Elizabeth was a reincarnated Venetian and that she was his long-lost soulmate. He also just casually claimed that Venetians would just randomly take human women and impregnate them to strengthen the human race, and that Venetians lived among humans. Honestly, that's a lot to throw at somebody after you brought them into your spaceship, but I guess Akan's just built different. Elizabeth would then find herself begging Akan several times, and was even brought to their home planet of Matan in 1959. This is where she would give birth to a healthy baby boy named Ailing. Ailing wouldn't return to Earth with Elizabeth, as he was to be educated on his homeworld. Elizabeth would also describe this planet as having no cities, and that the homes were scattered around in park-like grounds. They also had no shortages or anything like that, and had an unlimited supply of energy. So yeah, like I said, Elizabeth was a very interesting person. She would go on to publish a lot of her stories about her time with Akan in a book called Beyond the Light Barrier, which was released in 1980. And people didn't really believe her, since there wasn't really any physical evidence of her encounters with Akan. In fact, in 1959, nobody even noticed that she was pregnant with some alien baby. There were some photos taken of Akan's ship, but that's pretty much it for evidence. Sadly for Elizabeth, a decent amount of people around her would make fun of her constantly and harass her for years and years, though she stuck by her claims until her death on February 9th, 1994. As for Akan and Ailing, well, according to her, they're currently traveling the universe together with Ailing's wife Clea and their son.
When you make a great tasting candy, word gets around.
Gromufovitz.
You want Reese's Pieces, do you?
Ah, Reese's Pieces. Oh! Who in the world was that?
I don't know.
Oh,
Kind of looked like your cousin Willie.
Reese's Pieces with the great peanut butter taste that's out of this world.
Labor Day 1969 UFO incident. On September 1st, 1969, so Labor Day, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, a UFO was spotted several different times throughout the day, and at least 2 of these sightings involved the person seeing the UFO being abducted by it. The first report was from a family traveling in their car when suddenly the UFO appeared. The dad, being a genius, decided to chase the UFO despite everyone in the car telling him not to. This would result in the UFO grabbing the car with some kind of tractor beam and brought the family on board. One of the daughters in the family, Melanie, claimed to be placed into a room with several other children that she didn't recognize. As they waited for the aliens to return to do whatever, suddenly the children began disappearing one by one until eventually Melanie was teleported away as well and woke up by Lake Mansfield. Another report came in from a man named Thomas Reed, whose family was also just driving around when they saw the UFO as well. He described the UFO as being a white orb that was larger than a football field. They attempted to escape the UFO by driving away, but the UFO didn't back down and took the entire family into the ship. He claims that his family was brought into the UFO's hangar, and when they were led around the craft, he described the inside of the UFO as having fluorescent tubing all around the walls. He didn't really remember too much else at the time, as he was only 9, though he did remember waking up at his family's property when it was all said and done. Overall, the Labor Day UFO incident is a very strange case. So strange that a monument was built in its honor in 2015, only for it then to be taken down in 2019. Richard French crashed UFO. So this is like a sequel entry to the Roswell entry from Tier 1. You see, for years and years, people believed that there was only one UFO crash in Roswell in 1947. But according to Lieutenant Colonel Richard French of the US Air Force, there were actually 2 different crashes the same day in 1947. He claimed that the second UFO crashed a few miles away from the first UFO crash, and that this UFO was a rescue team attempting to find survivors of the first crash. And apparently, neither crash was actually a crash. Like they accidentally crashed into Earth. No. According to Richard French, the US military shot down both of them with an electronic pulse type weapon, because apparently we had that around that time. So yeah, according to Richard French, the US military shot down a UFO, and then shot down the UFO rescue party for good measure. Pliny the Elder's UFO. So here's the oldest sighting in the video, and perhaps might be the very first UFO sighting ever. Or at least, one of them. In 218 BC, the Roman historian, author, and naturalist Gaius Plinius Secundus, who I'm just going to call Pliny the Elder, as that's another name for him, and it's much easier to say. Anyways, Pliny the Elder reported seeing something very strange in the sky. In chapter 35 of his work, Natural History, he wrote, "We have an account of a spark falling from a star, it increasing as it approached the earth, until it became the size of the moon, shining as though through a cloud. It afterwards returned into the heavens." So, was this the first ever sighting of a UFO? I mean, maybe. I think it's way more likely he was describing a shooting star or something, though him saying the light became the size of the moon is admittedly pretty odd. 4chan alien. From February 19th to February 22nd, 2017, the website 4chan went down several different times. This was due to a temporary server outage. It wouldn't be that noteworthy if it wasn't for an image that was posted right before it went down. On the 4chan export, an image of an alien was posted. This was supposedly a real alien. This creature was described as having yellow scales with small lips. It had human-like features, but they were all smaller than normal. The photo was extremely high quality, and the alien was seen outside in the Arizona desert near Luke Air Force Base. Now this is where I'd show you the image, but I can't actually because it's apparently lost to media. When 4chan went down and came back up, the thread about the photo was gone, and any thread made about the alien thread was deleted pretty quickly, despite threads on the X board normally lasting quite a decent amount of time. This led to many people theorizing that 4chan was censoring the image of the alien, that the government was making the site delete any and all traces of the photo. There's been a lot of mock-ups of what the photo may have looked like, but the original photo is still missing. At least I think it is. There is this image that people claim may have been the original image, but if it was the original, then it's a fake. Regardless, it's a weird situation. Portage County UFO. On April 17th, 1966, 2 Ohio sheriff deputies engaged in a high-speed 86-mile chase from Portage County, Ohio to Conway, Pennsylvania. The chase began at 5 in the morning, where the 2 officers, Dale Spar and Wilbur Neff, heard a strange humming sound as they investigated an abandoned vehicle. They'd then discover a UFO looking down on them with a bright light. Funny enough, their first response to the UFO was to shoot at it, as that's what their dispatcher had instructed them to do upon contacting them. After that didn't work, the pair chased the UFO around as it began to speed off. But as they chased the UFO, they began to realize that the UFO was actually messing with them, as when the pair had to slow down when there was traffic or they were going over a bridge, the UFO would stop and wait for them to get closer, and then speed off again. This chase went on for about an hour and 20 minutes. It only stopped when their car was running low on gas. Though where one chase ended, another one began, as soon after, the pair picked up radio chatter from 3 Air Force jets pursuing the UFO. The officers described the UFO as being 40 feet wide and 20 feet tall, and looking like the head of a flashlight. It's a pretty wild case that sadly kinda has a lame ending, as the director of Project Blue Book, a government-funded project that investigated UFOs, showed up and interviewed the pair, and eventually came to the conclusion that the officers were chasing a stationary object and found out that there were no fighter jets ever dispatched to the area. So was there a UFO? I guess we'll never know. The Belgian UFO Wave. From November 29th, 1989 to April of 1990, dozens and dozens of reports of UFOs were reported all across Belgium. The reports usually described the UFO as being triangular in shape, with lights underneath it. This went on for quite some time until March 30th, 1990, when a UFO was spotted by the Belgian Air Force's radar, and so 2 pilots piloting F-16s were sent to investigate the craft. The 2 pilots attempted to intercept the UFO 9 different times, and all of these attempts went pretty poorly, as they were able to get a radar lock on the UFO 3 different times, in fact. Except it wasn't actually the UFO, and they instead radar locked each other. The pilots also didn't actually see the UFO, but according to eyewitnesses on the ground who were apparently watching the event, over 100 people claimed to see a UFO, with some now describing that this UFO had 4 lights in a square formation and moved in short, jerky motions. Eventually, on the morning of March 31st, both pilots were called back to base, and that was that. Though only a half hour after they returned to base, the UFO was spotted again, and this time it flew off into 4 different directions at once. So I guess it was like a combiner UFO or something. Finally, the triangular UFO made its return in April of 1990, where it was finally captured via a photograph. Except in 2011, the person who took the photo, a man named Patrick, came out and said, "Yeah, I made it up." He said he created the UFO using polystyrene, and that he and some friends painted it just in a few hours. The Google Earth Alien. On December 10th, 2011, an image began to go viral online of an alien creature that could be found on Google Earth. It was found near a home in Nancy-Lorraine, France, and it was fairly creepy looking. Most people agreed, though, that it was more likely just a statue. That was until shortly after the statue began going viral, Google blurred it. And to this day, it's still blurred, and nobody knows why. There's not really much else to say here. Why is it blurred out if it was just a statue? Who knows? Maybe it's not a statue. The Allagash Abductions. In August of 1976, Charlie Foltz, Chuck Rack, Jim Weiner, and Jack Weiner were out in the Allagash Forest in Maine. They were just chilling out on a camping trip where they'd fish, canoe, etc. Just a really chill time overall. That was until the 4th day of their camping trip, where the 4 of them were out on a lake in a canoe, when suddenly they all felt like they were being watched. The 4 then discovered a large ball of light floating just above the treetops. It changed from white to red to green in color, and they claimed it made no sound, although they did say that the light it produced was so bright that it looked like a miniature sun and lit up the entire forest. And then the light started making its way towards them. The next thing the 4 of them knew, they were all back on shore, staring up at the UFO as it flew off. And that was it for a while. They stayed out camping for another 10 days and never saw the UFO again. When they told people about their sighting when they returned to their homes, nobody believed them. And so they participated in a hypnosis therapy session, and that's when the 4 of them got their memories back. The 4 described how they were abducted by the UFO while out on the lake, and while on board the UFO, they were stripped naked and had medical examinations done on them. One such examination was done to Charlie Foltz, who had a device put onto him, and while having the device on him, his head was being tipped back. As for the aliens themselves, they were described as being your classic gray aliens, though apparently they could talk by sending messages to the brain. As the 4 of them heard the aliens say, "Don't be afraid. Do what we say. Just do what we say." It's a very interesting story, but it kind of falls apart as years after the incident, Chuck Rack came out and said that he doesn't think there was ever an abduction. He didn't say it was a hoax, but he did say they saw a UFO. He believes that what happened was that after they saw the UFO, he and his friends just got high or something, and that's why they lost track of time. Though at the same time, Charlie Foltz has come out and said that they weren't using drugs at all. Keep in mind, though, that the pair had a falling out, so it's possible that one of them is just trying to make the other one look bad or something. Regardless, it's a very interesting story. Solway Firth Spaceman. On May 23, 1964, Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter while near Berg by the Sands in England. Everything was normal until he looked at the photo. In one of the 3 photos he took, there was a strange figure that looked like a spaceman or an alien looming over his daughter. The photo became famous afterwards, as the photo was deemed genuine, so there was no editing involved with it at all. For years and years and years, nobody was able to explain why this alien or spaceman appeared in the photo. That was until 2014, where it was discovered that this alien was in reality Annie Templeton, Jim's wife. She was with her husband and daughter that day and was even seen in another photograph they took wearing a pale blue dress. And so it's theorized that the dress came out as white due to overexposure in the photo. Gorman UFO Chase. During the night of October 1st, 1948, North Dakota National Guard 2nd Lieutenant and World War II veteran George F. Gorman was flying a P-51 Mustang in a cross-country flight. At around 9 p.m., he saw something bizarre in the sky with him. He claimed to see a ball of light around 8 inches wide. The ball of light was moving at incredible speeds and was blinking. Though when the ball of light sped up, it would apparently stop blinking for just a second and then get brighter. Then the ball of light began playing chicken as it would fly towards Gorman's plane, only to then fly upwards at the last second. Gorman followed the orb and attempted to get closer to it, but failed to do so. The two made their way over to Hector Airport in North Dakota, where the orb was spotted by air traffic controller L.D. Jensen, along with several other people. Shortly after this, the orb flew off, and Gorman was forced to return to the airport. Members of the U.S. Air Force then arrived at the airport within a few hours to investigate the event. They found that Gorman's Mustang was far more radioactive than any other planes in the area, though at the same time, Gorman was flying at around 14,000 feet, and the atmosphere is less shielded from radiation, so the radiation was probably from that and not the orb. And finally, it was discovered shortly afterwards that on October 1st, only 10 minutes before Gorman saw the UFO, a weather balloon was launched in the area. Voronezh UFO Incident. On September 27, 1989, several teenagers were playing football or soccer in Voronezh, Russia, or the Soviet Union. In the middle of their game, they spotted something glowing pink in the sky. They then realized that it was a red ball around 3 meters wide. The ball circled around them and then disappeared, only to then reappear a few minutes later. It then landed nearby, and a 3-eyed alien wearing bronze boots walked out with a robot. And then the teens claimed the alien pulled out a ray gun and fired it at one of the teenagers, causing them to disappear. And then the alien and his robot friend left. Yeah, this is one of the more strange UFO alien sightings. And these teens weren't even the only ones who saw the alien. That same day, a police lieutenant claimed to see the alien flying in the sky. No, not the UFO. The alien. Just the alien himself flying in the sky. This caused the Soviet Union government to investigate the sighting. Despite there being some claims of them finding an alien rock where the teens saw the alien, there actually really isn't anything backing up that claim. The only thing we know for a fact they found was that the area they saw the alien did have an above average presence of cesium, a radioactive isotope. But this could be linked to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, as after that incident, cesium like this was found in many different places in the Soviet Union. Regardless, this is one of the more unique alien sightings. Varginha Alien Incident. On January 20th, 1996, the people of Varginha, Brazil were visited by aliens. A 5-foot humanoid alien with an extremely large head and thin body was spotted by a group of friends during a rainstorm. The alien had V-shaped feet, large red eyes, and brown skin. According to the group of friends, this bizarre-looking creature seemed to be sick, as it was wobbling as it tried to walk. Understandably, the group of friends fled the scene, where they'd tell 2 of the 3 friends' mother that they had seen the devil. And she was like, yeah, okay, sure. So she went out to investigate, and she didn't see any alien. Only the creature's footprints, and a horrible smell that was similar to ammonia. Later that day, 2 police officers would discover the same alien creature. The pair would capture it and bring it to a nearby hospital. When they brought it there, the hospital staff was like, no, we're not taking this thing in. Then, 2 days later, on January 22nd, another alien was spotted lying near a road, possibly dead. Shortly after this, 3 military trucks showed up and took the alien body into custody. The final sighting came from a pair of farmers who saw a UFO floating over their cattle at around 1 in the morning. It hovered there for about 40 minutes before finally taking off. What's interesting about this case is that on the date the alien was first spotted, January 20th, soldiers were seen investigating the nearby forest, some even returning from the forest with large sacks. After this whole incident went down, the government denied any knowledge of aliens in the area and said they didn't have any alien bodies. It's since become one of Brazil's most famous alien sightings, and even inspired a UFO-shaped water tower to be built in the area. Aurora, Texas UFO crash. In Aurora, Texas, on April 17, 1897, a UFO crashed into a windmill. This pretty much annihilated the UFO, causing it to blow up with debris from the craft going everywhere. The crashed UFO was investigated by locals, and a dead alien being was discovered in it, along with several papers consisting of strange hieroglyphics that recorded the alien's travels. 3 days later, on April 20th, a funeral was held for the little green man, who they just randomly decided was probably from Mars. The alien was then buried with several pieces of the destroyed UFO, while other pieces of debris were dumped into the well underneath the windmill. This whole story was reported in a newspaper article written by S.E. Haydon on April 19, 1897. It's a very weird story that's been since labeled as a legend, with some in Aurora, Texas even stating that the article was just made up as a joke to bring interest to the town. Antonio Villas-Boas abduction. On April 16th, 1957, Antonio Villas-Boas was plowing fields near São Francisco de Sales. I'm sorry, I don't speak Portuguese, I know I butchered that. While plowing, he claimed to see a red star that started to get closer and closer to him, until eventually he could see that it was actually an egg-shaped UFO. Upon getting close to the ground, the UFO extended 3 legs. This scared him pretty badly, so he attempted to flee on his tractor, but like many other UFO reports, the tractor's engine died. Shortly afterwards, he was confronted by an alien wearing gray coveralls. Its eyes were small, and instead of talking, it made weird yelping sounds. 3 more aliens then showed up, and the 4 of them dragged him into the spaceship. There, they would strip him and cover him with some weird gel. They then locked him in a room where gas was pumped into it, causing him to become violently ill. But then, another alien walked into the room. This alien was described as being extremely hot. He described her as being 5 feet tall, with a small pointed chin and large cat-like eyes. She had long blonde hair, and her hair in other regions was bright red. And so the two banged, and when the act was done, the alien then rubbed her stomach and pointed upwards, as if to tell him that she would be raising the child in space. Boas would then try to take something from the UFO as evidence that this all happened, but the aliens stopped him. Afterwards, he was escorted off the ship, and he was pretty mad about the whole situation. Mainly because he thought the aliens took him because they thought he was, quote, a good stallion for humanoids. After his incident with the aliens, he claimed to suffer from lesions, nausea, and headaches for weeks. He was also discovered to have been exposed to a large dose of radiation. He never saw the aliens again, though, and stuck to his story throughout his life, until he passed away on January 17th, 1991. He also got married and had 4 children. Though I guess if this story is true, he actually had 5 children. Hey guys, real quick, I need to point this out here. The rest of the video I'm going to sound different because I'm sick. I'm pushing myself forward, though, through this video because I want to get it out on time. So, yeah, hopefully my voice doesn't bother you. If it does, at least you're not sick. Or maybe you are, I don't know. Point is, it's going to sound different. USS Nimitz UFO. Throughout the 2010s, the Pentagon released several videos from the aircraft carriers, the USS Nimitz and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, showing UFOs. These videos have all become very popular online, as it's the US government acknowledging UFOs. These videos have been named FLIR, Gimbal, and Go Fast. Each of these videos were taken by aircraft carrier naval aviators, and to show them spotting strange objects flying over the ocean. These videos also have audio from the pilots pursuing the objects. Besides the theories about them being alien spacecraft, there's theories that these are actually drones being deployed by the Chinese or Russian military to lure pilots into turning on their radars in order for them to reveal their electronic intelligence capabilities. While others believe that these videos showcase some kind of electronic warfare by China and Russia. Finally, in April 2020, a Freedom of Information request was given to the US Navy to release more UFO footage. 2 years later, in 2022, the US Navy finally responded to the request by saying, "Yeah, we have more footage, but we're not going to release it." This is apparently because of concerns of national security. So it seems that most people in the government think that these videos showcase some kind of weapon or drone from another country, instead of, alien life. The Washington, D.C. UFO Incident. From July 12th to July 29th, 1952, Washington, D.C. was invaded by aliens. Or at least that's what some people say happened. Seriously, another name for this incident is the Invasion of Washington. Honestly, I feel like what happened in 1812 was more of an invasion. This was just some people seeing UFOs. The name's a little dramatic, I think. Anyways, it all started around 11:40 p.m. on July 19th, 1952, where an air traffic controller named Edward Nugent spotted 7 different UFOs on the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, could you pick a longer name, radar. Several other air traffic controllers there also confirmed that they had seen 7 different objects on their radar. These UFOs were moving around slowly in a group, and then suddenly flew off at speeds over 7,000 miles per hour. Upon flying off, several people reported seeing several streaking lights over Washington, D.C., with many describing them as, quote, falling stars without trails. A few days later, the very same cluster of UFOs returned to Washington, but this time, they had friends, as now the radars were picking up about a dozen UFOs. Now, the US Air Force was getting worried, and so several F-94s were scrambled to intercept the UFOs. The jets would travel to where the UFOs were found on radar, but every time they got close, they'd disappear and reappear in another location. And so for half the month of July 1952, there'd be the occasional squadron of UFOs that would appear and disappear again over Washington, D.C. There's been many different theories as to what these could have been, with one of the earliest theories being that these UFOs were simply temperature inversions, causing the radar's signals to bend and give false signals. But even then, that theory has been disputed by the radar operators who saw the UFOs, saying that they know what inversions look like, and that these weren't an inversion. Kecksburg UFO Incident. On December 9th, 1965, an enormous fireball was seen flying over the United States and Canada. This fireball would eventually crash into Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, where people reported seeing blue smoke after a loud thump was heard in the woods. They also felt the world vibrate as the fireball crashed into the ground. Almost instantly after it crashed into the earth, American soldiers swarmed to the crash site, and reportedly took a Volkswagen bus-sized UFO and brought it over to an Air Force base in Ohio. The UFO was described as being a bell shape, and as it passed over the United States and Canada, it lit grass on fire and produced sonic booms. There were also people who claimed that the UFO dropped metal debris as it passed. This incident was very strange, and so a ton of people began asking the US government what happened. And so astronomers came out and said that this was simply a meteorite that had burnt up in the atmosphere, and that was the official story for some time, despite many UFOologists not believing it. However, the story changed in December 2005 when NASA was forced to give up information and records about the incident after a Freedom of Information Act request was put on them. Now the story was that this wasn't actually a meteorite, but instead a crashed Soviet satellite, as apparently there had been satellite debris found at the crash site, though the actual initial records of the findings weren't given to the public, as apparently NASA lost them in 1987. So we have three stories now: a UFO, a meteorite, and a Soviet spy satellite. Well, there's actually two more major theories. The first being that these were the remains of the Soviet space probe Cosmos 96, and the second being a little bit more out there. Some have claimed that this object was a Die Glocke. This was supposedly a German secret superweapon made during the Second World War. It was bell-shaped and was about 12 feet tall. It also contained highly radioactive purplish liquid, so I'm just going to assume that's what purple stuff was. Jokes aside though, Die Glocke really has no actual evidence backing it, and pretty much everyone agrees it's pseudoscience or a hoax. So, I don't know, this was probably just a satellite. Or maybe it was an alien UFO. Dan Aykroyd saw a UFO. So Dan Aykroyd, loved him in the first two Ghostbusters films, and The Game, and of course Blues Brothers, but he's kind of a weird guy. I mean, just look at all the Crystal Skull vodka stuff he does now. Anyways, Dan Aykroyd has said before that he's seen about 4 different UFOs in his life. The most notable UFO he saw was in Montreal, Canada. While staying at the 23rd floor of the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, he claims that he spotted a UFO flying slowly across the sky. He claimed that this UFO was about 100 feet long, 50 feet wide, and looked like an air mattress. And it just flew off shortly after Dan Aykroyd saw it. There's not really anything else to the story, just a flying air mattress. Belombo Heights Alien. On October 5th, 2010, an alien was spotted by a teenager in Belombo Heights, Australia. He took a video of the alien and uploaded it to YouTube, where it started going viral. Since the initial sighting, the teenager who spotted the alien, named Alex, has encountered the alien several more times. One case where the aliens broke into his house, causing he and his mom to hide away in his room for about 2 minutes until the alien left. Now, when this video came out in 2010, a lot of people believed in the sighting. But then Alex saw the alien again, and again, and again. and again, until he eventually became pretty suspicious. And so a lot of people have since gone back to these videos and came to the conclusion that they're all hoaxes, due to the videos being extremely poor in quality, and how the alien moved like a prop or a toy. In fact, these videos are so poor quality, you probably don't know where the alien even is in the images that I've used. Overall, it's clear that this channel was just a fun little hoax channel. Betty Andreasson abduction. On January 25th, 1966, a woman named Betty Andreasson was chilling out at home with her 7 kids and her parents, when suddenly the lights to their home went off and a pink light shined through the back window. There, the family saw several little alien creatures. And that was it. The next morning, everything was fine, but Betty felt something was off. And she was right. Over the next few weeks, she'd get dreams of what happened to her, involving some strange creatures taking her into a UFO. This caused her to take part in a hypnosis session in 1974. It's then her memories returned to her. She claims that shortly after spotting the aliens outside, everyone was paralyzed as the aliens walked into their home. They then talked to Betty telepathically and took her into their UFO. There, she did the whole standard UFO abduction thing, like get tests taken on her, blood taken, etc. But then it gets weird. She claimed that the aliens put her on a plastic-looking throne that filled with a liquid that subsumed her. When she got out of the chair, she walked around the UFO and explored it, resulting in her being given visions that included weird monkey aliens, giant cities, and God, who was taking the form of a phoenix. God then told her that she was the chosen one, and then the aliens, aka the Quasiga, told her that they abducted her in order to help humanity, as they apparently loved humans. They then dropped her back off with a book and then flew off. This book was filled with symbols and words that Betty couldn't understand. To make matters worse, the aliens then told her that the book would teleport back to them after 10 days, so she only had those 10 days to figure out what the book said. She did not. Overall, it's a very, very weird story.
What is that?
It's a ship.
It's ancient.
There's an opening. Can you see what I'm seeing?
Yeah, giant rings.
Look at those colors.
I'm checking down below.
Be careful, I'm losing you.
Oh, I've got to see this.
Kellogg's Fruit Loop cereal, part of this complete breakfast.
Alien in the Freezer. On June 10th, 2013, a man named Mr. Lee posted pictures to social media of him standing next to a frozen alien body in his freezer. He claimed that he had spotted several UFOs flying around the Yellow River in Bingzhou, Shandong Province in China. As he was watching them, one of the UFOs came crashing down. An alien would then emerge from the crashed UFO and be killed by an electronic rabbit trap that Lee had set up. Police were then called once the photos went public, and, well, it turns out the alien was actually just made of rubber. I'm just gonna choose to believe this is a real alien, though. And if you're wondering why I censored this picture of the alien, it's because, he kind of sculpted the, female alien's parts. Aleister Crowley and the Greys. Aleister Crowley was an occultist, magician, poet, painter, author, and mountaineer from England. Born on October 12, 1875, Aleister was a very interesting person. From his history of sex magic, claims of experiencing past lives, creation of his own religion, etc., etc. However, none of these things are really relevant to why I bring him up. The reason why I'm talking about him is that in 1918, Aleister Crowley would participate in several rituals known as the Amuletra workings, a ritual that apparently allowed him to speak from beings beyond Earth, like from another planet or another dimension. During these rituals, Aleister claimed to come into contact with an entity named Lamb. Alastair would draw Lamb, and the drawing would be shown to the public in 1919. But this whole Lamb thing kind of got overshadowed by a lot of the other things that Alastair did throughout his life. It wouldn't be until near the 21st century when people rediscovered the drawing of Lamb and noticed how it was extremely similar to gray alien sightings. This has led to a theory that Aleister Crowley actually came into contact with aliens and that Lamb was simply one of them. In fact, many UFOologists and even occultists have claimed to have also met Lamb and described him as being cold and having a computer-like intelligence, and that he's beyond human comprehension. So, Soundwave. The Ruwa UFO Incident. On September 16th, 1994, in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, 62 students from the Ariel Private School were playing around outside during their mid-morning break, when they all spotted a silver UFO in the sky landing in a field near the school. And so, all the students ran over to where the UFO landed and were met with several alien creatures dressed all in black. These aliens approached the children and spoke to them telepathically. They talked about how important the environment was and how we should protect it. The aliens also just ominously said something was going to happen, but they didn't really go into detail about that. 15 minutes later, the aliens then went back into their UFO and flew off. When all 62 students returned to the school and told their teachers about what happened, every single teacher there refused to believe them. Later that day, when they all went back to their homes and told their parents about what they saw, they also didn't really believe them, but they did meet with the school body because of how weird the story was. In the following months, people would come to the Zimbabwe school to interview the children, where it was discovered that while most of the children agreed on what they saw, there were a few who saw different things than others. For example, some children claimed that there were several UFOs flying in the sky, instead of just the one that landed. Some of the children didn't even believe that these were aliens, but instead creatures from African folklore. Most skeptics have labeled this incident as simply a case of mass hysteria, but most of the children on that day who claim to have seen the alien still claim that their story is true. Ivan Wagner's Space Guests. On August 19, 2020, Russian cosmonaut Ivan Wagner uploaded a video to Twitter of something he captured while filming a time-lapse in the International Space Station. In the video, you can briefly spot 5 objects flying into frame in what seems to be some kind of flight formation. They're only seen for about 4 seconds, but this left many people online baffled by the video. Roscosmos, which is the Russian space program, reported that it was looking into the footage. It's since been theorized that these lights were actually just satellites or meteorites. Aztec, New Mexico captured UFO. In March 1948, a UFO crashed near Aztec, New Mexico. This UFO was reportedly 99 feet wide and had 16 aliens on board who all perished in the crash. The UFO was taken by the US military, and through research on the craft, they came to the conclusion that the UFO and its alien crew all came from Venus. The US military would then take the technology from the UFO and use it to create doodlebugs. These were devices that could find oil, gold, and gasoline anywhere. It's a pretty crazy story that was first reported by 2 con men named Silas Newton and Leo A. Gabier. And yes, you heard me right, con men. These 2 were going around New Mexico selling these doodlebugs. They made up the backstory about a UFO crash in order to make people believe in their product. In 1953, the 2 were forced to admit that they had lied about the doodlebugs and the story itself. Later that year, the 2 were convicted of fraud and sent to prison. And that would be the end of the story for a while, until the late 1970s, where author Leonard Stringfield claimed that while the pair were con men, the story they told about the UFO was true. He would go on to create more details about the story, such as how the UFO was made of a material that was impervious to heat, and that the aliens on board were all roughly 3 feet tall. And then finally, in April 2011, a memo by the FBI was discovered that supposedly revealed that the Aztec, New Mexico crash was actually real and was covered up by the government. Though in 2013, the FBI came out and said that this memo was simply a retelling of a third-hand claim that the FBI never bothered investigating. So what started as just two con men trying to make a quick buck turned into this mess. Jonathan Reed's alien attack. In 1996, a man named Jonathan Reed was walking in a forest in the Pacific Northwest with his dog, when suddenly they came across an alien just chilling out in the woods near a UFO. The dog started to bark at the alien, and so the alien just instantly killed it. Mortal Kombat style too, the alien ripped its head in half and then disintegrated it. Anyways, this made Jonathan Reed pretty mad, so he beat the alien to death with a stick right there. He then wrapped the alien body in foil and a thermal blanket and brought it home where he began to investigate it. Despite the 4-foot-tall alien being dead, it continued to blink as Reed tried to cut the alien's clothes off. He was unable to, as its weird spandex-like costume would instantly sew itself back together with every cut. The alien also had a tracking device that maintained a connection with the UFO. After investigating it for a few, he put the alien corpse in his freezer, only for the alien to then return from the dead and run out of his house. Reed would run after it, but wouldn't be able to catch it. And upon returning to his house, he found that he had been robbed by people with government license plates. Jonathan Reed would then become a pretty big member of the alien and UFO community, as he had also recorded a bunch of videos of the alien's body and the UFO, though the quality is extremely bad. He'd also go on to write a book about the event called Link, an Extraterrestrial Odyssey. It's a very weird case, but you know what's weirder? The Jonathan Reed alien and UFO Second Life avatar and vehicle that costs $125. I found this while researching the case, and who would buy this? This, why? $125, why would you waste money on this? Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump was a military operation done by the U.S. Navy to establish a research base called Little America 4 in Antarctica. They were also there to determine the feasibility of establishing and maintaining an airbase on ice and training soldiers in cold environments. The operation began on August 26, 1946, and ended in February the next year. This operation had around 4,700 soldiers, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft as part of the operation. Due to this being Antarctica, things weren't easy, and sadly 4 people lost their lives. 3 radio men were killed when their plane crashed during a blizzard, and another was killed in a ship unloading accident. It's a very interesting piece of US Navy history, but why am I talking about it here? Well, because some people believe that this was all a big lie. That Operation High Jump, while originally started to create a base in Antarctica, quickly turned into a combat situation, as some claim that the US Navy was attacked by UFOs. The story goes that while they were able to destroy one of the UFOs, they were under way too much fire from the aliens, and so they retreated back to the US, where Admiral Byrd Jr. began arguing for the US to set up defense bases in Antarctica. This story started because of a Soviet report declassified in 1991, where it was revealed that Soviet spies took part in the operation and reported their findings back to HQ. This all sounds pretty crazy, right? What's the evidence for all this? Well, as for Admiral Byrd wanting to put military bases in Antarctica, he did say this in an interview, but not because of UFOs, but because he said other countries could take advantage of there not being military bases there, and could use Antarctica as a way to sneak attack on the US and its allies. And then there's the fact that part of the story, which I didn't talk about because it's just so absurd, claimed that after he said this to the media, that Admiral Byrd was sent to a mental institution for the rest of his life. But this claim is just objectively false, because we know he didn't go to a mental institution for the rest of his life, because he went back to Antarctica during Operation Deep Freeze 1 in 1955, where he was once again placed in charge of the operation. He also passed away in his home on March 11th, 1957 due to heart ailment, not in a mental institution. There's no evidence to suggest that he was ever placed into an institution. As for the Soviet reports, I can't find it. Supposedly it was declassified, but I can't find a single thing about it online. The only places where I was able to find evidence about this even existing is on weird websites that, let's be real here, are not telling the truth, and fandom.com of all websites, own a single Russian documentary from 2006 that makes some very bold claims about Hollow Earth and stuff like that, so yeah, this whole story's not true. Operation High Jump was just a military operation to set up a base in Antarctica. The Red Lights. Gonna have to censor some swear words from the green text I'm gonna show you because YouTube will get mad at me. I know that's pretty lame, but it is what it is. So this is the last entry that comes from 4chan. There's been 3 different cases of people posting stories about how they were abducted by aliens via red lights. The first was from March 19th, 2018, where a man hopped onto the X-board and reported how at 3 in the morning, his hallway was glowing red for some reason. He heard this weird buzzing sound coming from there. He states that he also hears a whistling sound and claims to see a shadow-like figure moving around in the darkness. He then says he's going to investigate the red light, and upon investigation, he discovers that his windows and curtains are all shut. So the red light can't be coming from outside, and there's nothing inside to be causing it. And that was it. He disappeared, never to post anything else ever again. The second story starts up almost a month later on April 2nd, 2018, where another dude heads onto the X-board and claims that he sees some weird-looking cloud that he thinks is actually a UFO. As the OP starts taking pictures of the cloud, a blinking red dot comes out of it. The cloud then bails for a view before returning shortly afterwards. OP then starts posting about how he's starting to see streaks of light as he's looking around. When he eventually returns home, he begins hearing a scratching sound, and suddenly his house goes dark red. He then takes a photo of what looks like a shadow in his room, and that's the last post he ever makes. Disappears, just like the first OP. Finally, there's Michael. Later that year, on October 12th, 2018, a user named Michael told a story about how while he was in prison, he was cellmates with a man who claimed to be regularly abducted by aliens. This eventually leads him to be abducted by aliens as well. And every time it happens, the cell, or general area around them, gets extremely red. Michael then describes the experience as being paralyzed and getting a vibrating sensation in his limbs, like his cells are being thrown around. There's also a humming noise he hears. He also describes the aliens themselves, who he says are around 4.5 feet tall, having massive black eyes that reflect things like a mirror, extremely long limbs, and they all smelled like a burning phone charger. He also says that when he returns from the abduction, he has a small scar in the shape of a perfect circle with a triangle of 3 dots in the middle of it. He also shows a drawing that his former cellmates made of what the aliens apparently look like. After a while of the two being abducted in prison several times, his cellmate goes missing and is found by police, and they believe that he escaped the prison, but there's just no way he could have. Michael claims that to this day, he still thinks that he's abducted by these red lights. So these stories are all pretty crazy. I mean, they were all posted in 2018 and involve aliens abducting people with red lights. Too bad that these are all probably very, very, very fake. The creature a Metapec. So this little dude should have been in the cryptozoology iceberg, but I messed up and forgot about him. But he's also supposed to be an alien, so I guess it fits here. It was found in Mexico in 2007 by a farmer named Urso Ruiz, who accidentally caught it in a hunting trap meant for rats. The thing freaked out and was extremely hostile, so Urso killed it. The creature is about the size of a cat, with whitish gray skin and a large head. It's got 4 legs and a long rat-like tail. The creature's body was eventually bought by Jamie Masson, as he was so convinced that it was a real alien, he just had to own it. Sadly for him, though, it turns out that Urso Ruiz was lying, and that he actually had created the little guy as a hoax. In 2012, it was revealed via DNA testing that the creature of Metapec was actually just a buffy-tuft marmoset mummy. Urso then states that he actually had taxidermied the monkey, and it looked really weird, so he put it into a trap and took a photo of it. The rest is history. Utsurobane. In 1803, a strange UFO-like boat washed upon the shores of Japan. This UFO had an extremely attractive woman in it, and she interacted with the fishermen who discovered her, but she wasn't able to communicate with them as she just didn't know Japanese. This UFO and the woman inside would be dubbed Utsuro Bune, which translates into empty boat. Now, because this is an extremely old story, it's become part of Japanese folklore, and thus has several variations of the story that are mostly the same, just with some details changed around. For example, the UFO washed upon the shores of Japan on February 22nd, 1803 in one story, but in another it was March 22nd, 1803. Regardless, the rest of the story claims that the UFO she was in was 10 feet tall and 17 feet wide, with its upper part being made of rosewood, while the lower part was covered in brazen plates. Some claim that the boat had strange markings in it that match markings found during the Rendlesham Forest incident I talked about way earlier in the video. The woman, who was 4'9", had red hair and white hair extensions made of fur. She was extremely pale, and she wore long clothes that were made of a fabric that nobody in Japan recognized. She carried around a small pale box with her and wouldn't let anyone touch it. And so naturally, people began to, speculate that the box probably had her dead husband's head in it, and that the woman was actually a princess from another realm who had escaped the death penalty there. I know it's really immature to goof on folklore stuff, but I don't know, I thought that was kind of funny. After this realization, the fishermen placed her back into her UFO boat, and they sent her back into the sea. It's a pretty interesting piece of folklore that some people claim actually happened. I should also mention here that there's also other reported sightings of Utsuro Bune. Not the woman herself, but the boat UFO thingy. For example, sometime in the 7th century, a fisherman discovered the UFO and found a 13-year-old girl inside of it. She claimed that she was actually the daughter of a Chinese emperor and had silk cocoons with her. This story is known as Princess Wake, and while the fact that she was in a extremely similar UFO boat thingy is interesting, it doesn't relate too much to the main topic of the entry, but I thought I'd mention it here. Anyways, this story has been theorized to be either completely fictional, based on a true story of somebody from Russia or China landing in Japan, or it's an alien UFO. The 1561 Nuremberg phenomenon and the 1566 Basel phenomenon. Alright, so real quick, you might be wondering why I didn't include the War of the Worlds radio show in this Iceberg, and that's because 1, it was a case of mass hysteria, and 2, nobody actually saw anything. That's like the big part of why I didn't talk about it. As at least in the few hoaxes that I've actually talked about in this video, people actually saw something for the most part. I bring this up now because these two instances are also referred to as an example of mass hysteria. But at least here people claim to have actually seen something. Anyways, on April 14th, 1561, dozens of people in the free imperial city of Nuremberg, in the Holy Roman Empire, saw an aerial battle in the sky. Hundreds of spear-shaped, cylinder-shaped, and triangle-shaped objects flew across the sky in a battle. This was followed up by an enormous black triangle making its appearance over the skies of Nuremberg. Following this, all the objects either vaporized into smoke or just flew off. While many people believe this to be an early UFO sighting, others simply believe this was just a sundog or a swarm of insects. 5 years later, in Basel, Switzerland, a similar event occurred. On July 27th, July 28th, and August 7th, 1566, dozens of people in Basel, Switzerland, claimed to see hundreds of black and red spears flying across the sky in a battle. This event is often regarded as an example of mass hysteria, like I mentioned. Though there are still plenty of people who claim to this day that it wasn't actually mass hysteria or a sundog or anything like that, but instead an example of a battle between alien empires. Meng Jianhua Incident. In 1994, a man named Meng Jianhua, along with his wife and daughter, were living near a logging camp he was working in Wuchang, China. One day, he spotted several lights in a metallic shimmer in the distance. Believing it to be a crashed helicopter at first, he made his way over to it in order to scavenge it for scrap, like he was playing Far Cry 6 or something. Anyways, when he got to the wreckage, suddenly he was hit in the head by something and was knocked out. He He woke back up in his house with no memory of what happened or how he got there. A few nights later, he woke up in the middle of the night and saw a 10-foot tall alien floating over him. This alien was described by Meng as having extremely furry legs and 6 fingers on each hand. This creature would then have sex with him for about 40 minutes before leaving, because why not, I guess. And then, about a month later, Meng was just walking around his house doing whatever, until suddenly he found himself being able to walk through walls and fly. He then flew through his ceiling and into the stratosphere, where he found a UFO. He flew into the UFO and found several aliens talking in heavily accented Chinese. They told him that they were refugees, as their homeworld was dying, and they were looking for a new world. This homeworld was apparently Jupiter, by the way, so I guess Jupiter's dying. While on the ship, he asked the aliens if he could see that weird alien that he banged, but they all refused. They said that in 60 years on a planet far away from Earth, that his and the alien's child would be born. They also said that if he was still alive in 60 years, that he'd be able to see his son. He was then returned to his home and found that he had lost the ability to fly and pass through walls. At the time of this event, Meg was 29, so if he lives to be 89 years old, then maybe he'll be able to see his disgusting hybrid monster baby. Also 1. On October 25th, 1974, a man named Carl Higdon was hunting elk in Medicine Bow National Park in Wyoming. As he fired his rifle at one of the elk, he experienced something strange. His rifle didn't give any kick or recoil. In fact, the gun was completely silent when it fired. He also claimed that he was able to watch the bullet leave the barrel of the rifle and soar straight towards the elk, like he was playing Sniper Elite. But then an alien walked up to him. No, really, that's how the story goes. He just kind of shows up. Anyways, the alien walks up to him and asks him, "How you doing?" Higdon was pretty spooked by this, so he just said, I'm pretty good, doing pretty good. Alien's just like, cool. Cool, you hungry? Then the alien gave him some, small floating package that contained 4 pills. The alien then finally introduces himself as Also One. Also One then returned to his UFO, which looked like a cube. He then asked Higdon if he wanted to come along with him. And he said sure, why not? Higdon would then hop onto the alien's UFO, and they flew off. On the ship, Higdon found that the elk he was hunting were also there, but in a weird holding cell. He was then given a weird wire-covered helmet, and the pair eventually traveled to Also One's homeworld. He described the world as having a ton of buildings surrounding one giant tower that dwarfed everything on the planet. Higdon then claimed that as they were landing, he saw 5 humans walking around on the planet's surface, which would later be explained to him by Also One as being there for breeding purposes. Upon entering the tower, he was then scanned by the aliens, which went really poorly, as Also One then looked over at him and said that he didn't suit their purpose, meaning that they couldn't use him for breeding, because Higdon had actually gotten a vasectomy a few years back. The next thing Higdon remembered is being brought back into the forest with his rifle, but without the pills. He was also pretty injured though, as Also One was kind of a dick and dropped him back into the woods near a ditch, and so Higdon fell 9 feet down into the ditch. He would then be brought to the hospital by police and receive treatment for his injuries. But while there, it was discovered that the scarring in his lungs that had been discovered by his doctors in 1958 was now gone. To wrap this entry up, Higdon described Also One as being 6 feet tall and wearing a skin-tight black outfit with harnesses on his chest. He had no ears or eyebrows, had extremely small eyes, antenna, and 3 large teeth. Also One also had a drill on his hand, like Megalon, so that's kind of cool. Bigfoot. So I talked about Bigfoot quite a bit in the cryptozoology iceberg, but I failed to mention something about Bigfoot. You see, there's a good amount of people out there who claim that Bigfoot isn't an ape or a cryptid. Instead, they think that Bigfoot is an alien. This all stems from a theory from 1973 that involves orange orbs that fly around and are spotted by people near areas people claim to see Bigfoot. There's also been people who've claimed to have seen Bigfoot near a UFO. Some Bigfoot hunters even claim that Bigfoot might be using a multi-dimensional portal to travel continents and countries, which explains why Bigfoot-like creatures are seen on every single continent of the planet, besides Antarctica. So, yeah, Bigfoot might be an alien. I don't know. The Michelin Man. So you might think of the Michelin Man as the mascot of the Michelin Tire Company. Well, I mean, it is, but it's also the nickname of an alien creature seen several times throughout the 20th century. These aliens are referred to as Michelin Men, because they're extremely similar looking to the mascot I just mentioned. One of the first sightings of these aliens was in Spain in May of 1960, where a teacher spotted two of these bubble-like aliens walking up a steep hill. He described them as being about 2 meters tall, and said that they walked like a robot. Also, one of them had just like a black boot on. I don't know why, he just had a black boot. Another sighting was on July 31st, 1968, on the island of Reunion. A farmer spotted an oval-shaped UFO floating in the forest. He could actually see inside the UFO, and there were two aliens inside that looked like the Michelin Man. When the aliens saw him, they flashbanged him and flew off. No, I'm not kidding. As soon as he realized that the aliens saw him, everything went white for him. So, I mean, they flashbanged him. The last sighting I'll talk about is from a woman who was driving in the middle of a blizzard with her sister and brother. There, they saw the Michelin Man alien hanging onto a truck in front of them. The alien then looked back at them, smiled, and made a motion for them to follow it. Now, the Michelin Man didn't really do anything else here, at all. They followed him for about 2 hours before driving off, so I guess he was just catching a ride. Imagine you're driving and you look back and there's this giant marshmallow mascot alien clawing into your car. Ashtar. In 1952, a man named George Van Tassel claimed to receive telepathic messages from an interdimensional alien named Ashtar, who claimed to come from a world that orbits the star Alpha Centauria about 4 light years away. He was able to receive these messages because he had tapped into the universal mind of God. This allowed him to talk to aliens and dead people, like Nikola Tesla, for example, who he claimed gave him instructions to create a machine that could extend human lives and travel through time. This machine would be known as the Integration. This universal mind of God was taught at the Ministry of Universal Wisdom, which was a religious group that claimed that Jesus was an alien. Anyways, Ashtar would continue to talk with Van Tassel, and would tell him that if humanity were to ever detonate a hydrogen bomb, it would destroy the world. And when that hydrogen bomb test didn't actually destroy the world, Ashtar then said that he led his military forces and did something to, save the Earth. Now you're probably curious, what do I mean by military forces? Well, Ashtar is apparently the commander-in-chief of the Ashtar Galactic Command. Anyways, Ashtar would then contact several other people and warn them of dangers and how the LEGO Space Police were gonna, save humanity or something. While this was all happening, George Van Tassel just kept saying that those weren't real, and that Ashtar only spoke to the Ministry of Universal Wisdom. So you've probably realized this by now, but I'll just say it for those who haven't realized it. Ashtar is an example of a UFO religion. Anyways, to this day, there are still people who believe that they've talked to Ashtar. For example, in 1984, there was somebody who claimed that the world was ending, then that aliens would come to rescue them, and that Ashtar followers would be ambassadors and peacekeepers between the two species. This didn't happen though, so I guess they were just wrong. To wrap up the Ashtar stuff, I need to talk about the 1977 Southern Television broadcast interruption. As the name suggests, on November 26, 1977, the TV broadcaster Southern Television had its audio hijacked by an unknown party, and so, for about 6 minutes, a voice claiming to be an alien named Vrillian who was apparently representing the Ashtar Galactic Command, would then talk about how humanity needs to abandon weapons so it can participate in a future awakening. To this day, the person or group responsible for the hijacking have never been identified or found. David Huggins. David Huggins is a painter who claims to have had a very interesting relationship with aliens. When he was a kid, he claimed to see aliens in his family's barn. This would scare the crap out of him, as it would any kid, so he'd often run to tell his parents what he saw, but nobody would believe him. But he continued to see these aliens, some of which were gray aliens, and some of which looked like bug people. In fact, one of these aliens would end up taking his virginity. No, I'm not joking, it's another one of these stories. He claims that when he was 17 years old, he was out walking in the woods and found an alien woman named Crescent, who was rather odd looking. Like, she looked exactly like a human woman, except she had a gray alien head, and she was wearing a pretty obvious wig. And the two just hit it off, I guess, because they almost immediately started banging. Huggins actually painted this moment of his life, but I cannot show you this painting for very obvious reasons. Anyways, this began his relationship with Crescent, who he's apparently in love with, and has had several human-alien hybrid babies with. It's actually a mutual love, as Crescent is supposedly very much in love with David, and has even taught David how their species kisses. It's by touching foreheads. Anyways, her and the other aliens that she travels with told him to never speak about them to anyone until he was 50 years old. Very random rule, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess. But yes, David had a ton of alien babies. He's described one instance where he was taken to a room in a UFO where he saw, like, a room filled with babies, and the aliens made him touch the heads of every single one of them. Don't worry though, it gets weirder. When he touched the babies' heads, static electricity would then jump from him to the alien babies, and some bug prey mantis alien nearby was like, dude, did you see that? That's pretty nuts, that's crazy, what? That same bug alien would then phase through David later, and it was apparently an incredible experience according to him. This was supposedly a form of energy therapy. David would also bang quite a few other alien women, and human-alien hybrid women, as Crescent and the other aliens had asked him to. But while David could bang aliens and hybrid women, the one time he got a human girlfriend, the aliens were like, no, that's not happening, and they scared her off. I should also probably mention here that there's also a period of time where David was forced to forget the aliens' existence, but then the aliens would then show up again like a decade later and gave him his memories back. They also surprised him with a clone of himself and the news that he has 100 alien babies with several alien women. Yeah, the story of David Huggins is pretty weird. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go take a walk in the woods and see if I can find Tali from Mass Effect, so I'll be back in a few.
I want to sell my car. It's a second millennium groper.
Oh, we bought one of those last week for $12,000, 60 Martian kronas. Bring it in. Let's look at it.
Sell your car at Car Cash. We buy any year, make, or model from a Chevy to a Rolls. Dial C-A-R-C-A-S-H. That's the same as dialing 227-2274. Wow, a deluxe model. We can give you 16,080 krona.
That's more than I get on Mars.
Sell your car today. Call Car Cash 227-2274.
1987 Guatemala Battle. In 1987, Major Alan Schaefer, nicknamed Dutch, led a team of soldiers into the Guatemala jungles in order to rescue a politician from insurgents in the area. Sadly, despite his team being extremely well prepared for the mission and armed to the teeth, only Dutch returned from the mission, alongside a female insurgent member who was captured by the team. Upon returning to the United States, Dutch claimed that his team had been attacked by something not from this world, an alien creature that stalked the team like a predator and killed them off one by one, skinning their bodies and taking skulls as trophies. Dutch claimed to have killed the creature, but couldn't bring its body back due to it apparently activating a bomb implanted into its arm to destroy evidence of its existence. 1996 Mothership Sighting. On July 2nd, 1996, an enormous alien mothership was spotted by the moon. Shortly afterwards, several enormous UFOs were spotted flying over US cities like Los Angeles, New York City, and Washington, D.C. US forces engaged in several fights with the alien threat. This resulted in an alien and UFO being captured. Using the stolen technology, US Air Force Captain Stephen Hiller and satellite engineer David Levinson were able to travel into space and destroy the alien mothership, ending the invasion. Strangely, it seems that many people have forgotten about this incident. 1982 San Fernando Valley Encounter. In 1982, an alien was found living amongst humans in San Fernando Valley in California. Shortly after Halloween that year, the US government was thankfully able to locate and experiment on the disgusting creature. The government agents and police officers that apprehended the alien were armed with walkie-talkies and quarantined the entire town. However, the alien was dying, and so sadly very few experiments could be done on it. Even more unfortunately, the alien was then stolen from the government, despite it being government property, and it was stolen by children who were somehow able to get the creature to lift them in the air over local police in the area. It was then reported that the alien was able to be sent back to its home world. As for the family that allowed it to live with them and helped it escape, all of them were arrested and charged with treason. 1979 Lillian, Ohio event. In 1958, the United States Air Force captured an alien as it crash-landed into the United States. And for the next 21 years, they kept the alien in captivity. This all changed in 1979, where a group of children were making a film in Lillian, Ohio, during the middle of the night. That night, they narrowly escaped being killed by a derailed train that was containing the alien. It escaped, and for the next few weeks, the town of Lillian, Ohio, was terrorized by the creature. Despite the military's best efforts to recapture or kill the creature, they were unable to, as the children were able to get the alien back to its ship, where it flew off. We can only hope that it doesn't come back with more of its kind, out for revenge for the 21 years of abuse it went under. Apollo 18 mission. In December 1974, Apollo 18 were sent off to the moon in secret. The team consisted of Commander Nathan Walker, Lieutenant Colonel John Gray, and Captain Ben Anderson. When they arrived on the moon, they discovered a dead Soviet cosmonaut, proving that the Soviet Union landed on the moon before we did. They also came across strange creatures that looked like rocks. These rock aliens were spider-like, according to the leaked footage. These creatures killed all 3 members of Apollo 18, as they were able to get the lander and command module to crash into each other. Officially, it was listed that the 3 astronauts died in jet accidents. As for the aliens, many of the rocks brought back from the moon have begun to disappear. 1994 Cayman Trawl crash. In January 1994, a USO, an unidentified submerged object, crashed into the Cayman Trawl. This resulted in the United States sending in a Navy SEAL team to an underwater drilling platform near the Trawl in order to use it as a base of operations as they investigate the crashed USO. It's not known what exactly happened during the mission, but according to Virgil Brigman, a member of the drilling platform's crew, an underwater alien city was discovered at the bottom of the trench. Also, several mega tsunamis were reported, but strangely collapsed right before hitting the shoreline. It's unknown if this is connected to whatever happened down there. 1982 Johannesburg sighting. In 1982, an enormous UFO was spotted over Johannesburg, South Africa. However, unlike every other UFO case in history, this UFO didn't fly off, but instead hovered in place for 3 months. South African investigators were able to infiltrate the craft and discovered over 1 million starving alien refugees, known as the Prawn. And so, the South African government gave the aliens a camp to stay at called District 9. There, the aliens lived in peace and harmony for years. No violence or corruption has ever been reported in the camp, and human-prawn relations are very healthy and stable. The Close Encounter War. In the late 2040s, it's been reported that over 24 skyscraper-sized alien entities will arrive on Earth and cause the near extinction of mankind. In their conquest, they will destroy most of the world's cities, though they will all be killed by human forces eventually. And by 2059, several of the alien bodies will be turned into mech-like weapons to protect the human race in case more of these aliens ever return. This war will be known as the Close Encounter War. The RIMPAC 2012 attack. In 2005, NASA discovered a potentially habitable world they named Planet G. In order to see if there were alien life on the planet, a communication system was built to send radio signals off to the planet. 7 years later, during the 2012 RIMPAC's exercise, the aliens responded to the radio signals, and 5 alien battleships arrived on Earth and landed in the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. Before humanity could respond, these alien battleships jammed the world's radar and communication systems. US Navy ships in the area then engaged in battles with the alien battleships, and eventually discovered that the aliens are from Planet G, and they're a species that destroys other worlds. Eventually, with the help of an old World War II battleship and the legendary war hero gunner's mate Cora Rakes, the aliens were destroyed, and the US military were able to cover up the event, as without communications and radar, no civilian was able to see the ships. And if they were sworn to secrecy. It is believed that all the aliens died during the battle, and that there is no other aliens on the planet. And that's it. That's the Alien and UFO Iceberg. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. It was an interesting experience to make. That's all I'll say, because when there's some stories that are on here that are a little wacky, a little zany, but yeah, it was a fun time. If you're expecting me to do like next Halloween, like a ghosts iceberg or like whatever, don't. Like, as I said, I'm pretty sure I said at the beginning of the video that I ghosts just don't interest me in the slightest. I already know what I'm doing next Halloween anyways, so stay tuned for next year. I will say, and there's gonna probably be a bunch of people in the comments that are gonna be like, "You missed this case. You missed this case." There are so many UFO and alien sightings out there that are so there's a million of them. I can't have all of them in here, so I chose the ones that I thought were the most interesting, the more like weird ones, the ones that like some couldn't explain. Then I threw in a couple of known hoaxes, just because why not? They're interesting. So yeah, no, if your favorite UFO or alien sighting wasn't on here, put it down in the comments. What did I miss? And like I said earlier, like I didn't do the War of the Worlds broadcast, which a lot of people were expecting apparently, because no one saw anything. Like it was a case of mass hysteria. Nobody actually like saw anything, as far as I know. Maybe somebody did. I don't know, but yeah, that's more of like a mass hysteria iceberg, which I mean you can watch Wendigoon for that. Don't have much else to add. Hope you guys enjoyed. Oh, actually, no, I do know. I have one thing to add. I don't know if there will be an iceberg in November, and that's because December there's going to be a massive iceberg that is a very highly requested iceberg. So I'm not going to say what it is, but I'll reveal it towards the end of November. But maybe I'll do a mini iceberg real quick. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Happy Halloween. All that kind of stuff. Stay safe. Stay healthy. See you guys in the next one.